Ladies and gentlemen.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Constructed Criticsim. I'm your host, Spencer, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Michael.
How's it going?
And Casey, the Big Tuna Blubber.
Hey, what's up?
What's up, Big Tuna?
Not a lot, man. Just taking it easy.
It's a good nickname.
It is a good nickname.
Yeah, it's a great one. So, recording the set review today is exciting. Casey and I went to Wendover last night, so that's basically Atlantic City for those who are not aware.
All right. I don't know that.
Not going back to that?
It's a little border town on the border of Utah and Nevada that has casinos.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
And then Michael played in the midnight pre-release.
Yeah, it was interesting.
So we are all so chipper today.
Yeah.
Woo.
But we're here, so
Woohoo.
you know.
We're here. We're present, accounted for, ready to
Which is
review
not something,
the magic cards.
Which is not something you can always say about us.
That's true, especially Michael.
That is
was
true.
Pretty hit or miss for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I did just actually miss a podcast once, so it is a thing that can happen.
Don't forget to check out our sponsors at Oasis Games and 5 Color Combo. You can go to their website at 5colorcombo.com or oasisccg.com. You can get all of your Magic needs at Oasis, as well as download 5 Color Combo's app, Drafting Magic, or Magic Drafter, one of the two. I'm the worst. No response to that.
Yeah. I actually kind of zoned out while you were talking. I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm unreal tired.
But yeah, check out the sponsors, and you can also join the Patreon by going to patreon.com/ccmtg. You can donate any amount that you see fit. We're happy with literally anything. The show will always be free, but we really appreciate anything that we can get. So, all right, let's go to our first card. So for those who don't know, if you are a patron of the show, you get to submit your top 25 cards in every new set, and we actually do a set review using our rankings of the cards as well as your rankings of the cards as the patrons of the show. So thank you so much to all the patrons who submitted their top 25. It's AP pool style, so you get 1 point for 25th, 25 points for first, it kind of just, and then the appropriate points in between.
Yeah, if you need more explanation, tweet at me or whatever. I'll break it down for you.
Yeah.
Really? Yeah, I think it's pretty clear.
Yeah, I was just kidding.
Okay.
Coming in first, we have...
But you may sell sunglasses, so...
That's true. He also will sell you sunglasses while explaining it to you.
By the seashore.
Yep. What? The first card is Sky Sovereign Console Flagship. Why don't you go ahead and read that for us, Michael?
All right. Sky Console Sovereign... No.
Sky Sovereign
Sky
Console Flagship.
it sounds... You can just change the words around. No one will doubt you.
Say anything with confidence.
Yeah, exactly. What could go wrong?
People will believe you.
All right. So...
It's in the
flagship, yeah, whatever. Alphabet is hard. Sky Sovereign Console Flagship is a 6/5 flying vehicle for 5 colorless mana. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, it deals 3 damage to target creature or target planeswalker an opponent controls. What do you guys...
Yeah, let's give it our rate. Let's go 0 to 5 ratings, 2.5 being normal, and I would give this card about a 2.5. Maybe a 3. I think the decks that want this card are gonna like it, but a crew 3 is gonna be something that's hard to achieve in a lot of decks. But the ones that can achieve it and want this effect could really like it.
Yeah, this is a card that I could easily see being way off base on, but I think that it's about a 3-ish. I wouldn't expect it to see a lot of play, and I expect it to be like a 2-ish. Yeah, 1 to 2-ish of. But this could also be I would not be that shocked if this were one of the more played cards, right? Just because it does have high enough upside that if there are a lot of 3 power creature or 3 toughness creatures running around, this cleans them up like nobody's business.
So I think of this as a planeswalker murderer. This thing just nice planeswalker, not anymore. You need instant speed removal spell to take it out. When it comes into play, it can shoot a planeswalker or it can shoot a creature that could block a 6/5 flying that's attacking a planeswalker. I don't know if this card is really going to see that much play. It seems kind of It's kind of clunky. I'd probably give it like a 2. I'd be surprised if this is a card where really that's seeing a lot of play in this format, but could definitely be wrong. It's ridiculous in sealed, and I'm sure it is in draft too.
And I kind of agree with your assessment. It's just like it's a card that has a high enough power level that I could see it seeing play, but I don't necessarily expect it to just on its face.
Yeah, I don't really understand like what deck is interested in this effect, but I mean, a 6/5 for 5 that is shooting something for 3 every time it attacks or comes into play is like it's obviously relatively powerful.
Yeah, I think that it needs to be like a pretty big aggressive deck to want something like this. So, who knows? Maybe we're wrong, and like maybe just some mid-range deck plays it, or like just some random deck that we wouldn't have expected. Next we have Voltaic Brawler. Sorry.
Voltaic Brawler is a 3/2 for red-green. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy, and whenever it attacks, you may pay an energy. If you do, it gets +1/+1 and trample until end of turn.
Michael?
I think this card is it's pretty good. If there's any kind of a aggressive deck that really just any kind of an aggressive red-green deck, this card is pretty clearly fitting in there. The rate is quite good. I like that it's able to attack through Sylvan Advocate and that kind of stuff.
Casey?
Yeah, I tested the green-red energy deck as actually the first deck that I tested in this format, and this card was very good in it. It was kind of the glue that held the deck together. And I think this card is probably like a 3.5. I think it will almost definitely see play.
Yeah, this is to me, this is like Wizards being like, hey, here's this thing, go do this thing. And those cards are typically okay. I feel like Wizards almost never, when they present something to you like this, it's almost never the best thing in the world. It's just giving you a baseline. And I feel like that's what this card is, and I would give it a 2.5.
No, it makes sense. I think the card individually is really powerful, but I agree with you that I don't see a world where Wizards prints this and then red-green energy is the best deck because it's just so uninteresting.
Well, yeah, and it's also they would have to miss it by a lot if they missed it in their,
Yeah, because it's literally
it builds itself. Right?
Yeah,
right. But there's nothing. Right, there's no complex interaction. It's it's just a 4/3 trample for 2 when it attacks.
Yeah, just the fact that it does its thing where it beats down on its own, but it can help keep your Hellions in play, things like that. I think the card and the deck is powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's very straightforward.
Speaking of things that can keep your Hellion in play, next we have Bristling Hydra. It's
2 and 2 green for a 4/3. When it enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy, and then you can pay 3 energy to put a +1/+1 counter on Bristling Hydra, and when you do that, it gains hexproof until end of turn.
You think this card's okay?
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it might be a sideboard card in your more aggressive green decks against control decks.
I think it could also see play in any kind of mid-range deck that wants energy as well.
Sure, any deck that has that's going to be playing with tons of energy, I see this card as being very good because it could do Thrun impressions, right, where it just beats you down and it can never die.
Right. So one of the things I like about this card actually is that you don't have to spend just having energy is kind of a deterrent, so you don't necessarily have to actually spend it. And if they do eventually find a way to kill it that gets around you having energy, you can use the energy elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. You don't actually have to do anything, right?
Right.
They're not going to run a removal spell into this with 3 energy.
Well, they can, and then it's fine for you, right? If they're going to burn 2 removal spells, whatever. But I like that this card, I think, frequently is actually going to be a 4/3 that makes your opponent sit there and kind of fidget with their removal spell, and then enables something else with energy. Or if you happen to have 6 energy laying around, this card just gets really, really hard to kill.
Yeah. I would give this card a 3. I think it's good.
I would be pretty surprised if this didn't see any play. It's hard to kill.
Yeah, it's a reasonable threat that's hard to kill, so I would give it in the same range. Like I said, I expect it to likely see play more out of the sideboard than the main deck, but if the metagame goes in a direction where it you are boarding it in every matchup, certainly it could be a very powerful main deck card.
It's a card you could get excited about boarding in, right? It's pretty good when
it's
good.
an ace in your sleeve for sure.
Yeah.
All right, next up we have Inventor's Apprentice.
Inventor's Apprentice is a human artificer. It is a 1/2 for a red, and it gets +1/+1 as long as you control an artifact.
This card is basically Kurt Ape in like artifact aggressive decks.
Yeah, I pretty much like all the red-based aggressive decks we've tried have played this guy or gal. This gal, not this guy, I think. And she's really powerful. She just like, I mean, she's not like flashy or anything, but a 2/3 for 1 is pretty good, and it's really easy. There are a bunch of artifacts I'm interested in playing, so it doesn't feel like much of a cost.
Yeah, I agree. It's typically like just really good, and I think that it's a 3 also, like just above average, and like is going to be a 4 of in like maybe a couple of different decks, maybe a couple of different aggro decks, until the best one is found, and then it will just be in that one. But
yeah, I mean it's basically Kurt Ape. I've never had this card not be Kurt Ape, more or less. The fact that if you top deck it late, it could be like after a Wrath or something, it could be just a 1/2 is kind of bad. But hopefully, if you're playing enough artifacts to play this card, you're likely going to draw one pretty shortly. So I think the card is very good, and Kurt Ape is, I mean, it sees modern play. It's even seen Legacy play back when Zoo was a playable deck in Legacy. This is a totally reasonable. This is like one of the better red aggressive 1-drops.
Yeah, I mean, a 2/3 for 1 is just like clearly at least fine, and sometimes very good.
Exactly.
All right, next up we have Demon of Dark Schemes. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little surprised that this is on the list.
I think this card looks pretty powerful. It is a little bit clunky. It's 3 and 3 black for a 5/5 flying, and when it enters the battlefield, all other creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. Whenever another creature dies, you get an energy, and then you can pay 3, 2 and a black, so 2 and a black and also 4 energy to put a creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control tapped. How's that for a mouthful?
Yeah, it is a mouthful. I don't... So, triple black is a lot.
And 6 mana is a lot for an infest.
Yeah,
it's just kind of running back Massacre Worm, right?
Yeah, but that, despite what Patrick Chapin says, that card actually did not see a lot of play.
Sure.
Almost 0, actually. I don't... I mean, yeah, it's gonna see a little play because it's Massacre Worm.
It seems powerful. I haven't tried a lot of decks with this guy yet, but I'm kind of interested to do so.
Yeah, I don't know. It has a lot of words on it. Like, a lot. Like, maybe too many. But it seems... It doesn't seem impressive to me. Like the two... Anything that dies to an infest, I don't really care about reanimating. Especially not for that much of mana and everything. So, like, I know that you can get anything back, but the card is just weird. I don't know.
I agree.
It doesn't read as a good card to me, but it does a lot of things.
I agree that like the abilities don't line up that well. Like like the things that, like you said, the things that are dying to your infest or drown in sorrow or whatever, like probably not the same things you're trying to reanimate. But I don't know. I could imagine it sort of. I don't know. Just like if I'm playing like some number of Emrakuls and like Vessel of Nascency and stuff like that, I can kind of get into this card as like at least as a 1/of to get with Traverse. I don't know. The reanimation part of it seems pretty powerful if you're really generating much energy.
Yeah, and like the card, I think what Casey said is right. It like passes the word test. It has like a bunch of words in it. Like we'll probably see a little bit of play. It doesn't excite me. I'm not excited. I also got bit by Massacre Worm, where like I was really excited for that card, and it turned out not to be that great. So I don't know. I'm not sure. Next up, we have Glimmer of Genius.
Glimmer of Genius is an instant that costs 3 and a blue. It says scry 2, then draw 2 cards. You get 2 energy.
Casey, thoughts?
I think this card is pretty good. I've been playing in a lot of different decks, and I think the fact that it can something that you hold up in addition to counter magic in the mid to late game is really nice in your control decks, where like we're just flashing it back with like the blue Gear Hulk. If you have nothing else to flash back with it, I think it sort of just rounds out your blue decks pretty well.
Michael, any thoughts on this? Like you've obviously got the chance to hit this card, I would assume.
Yeah, I like it pretty well. I kind of like this card a little bit more, at least at this point, in decks where energy is not the primary focus, but it's really like this card is pretty sweet if you're playing like Harness Lightning and Aether Hub, or like things where you're getting like incidental value off the energy, like an extra 2 damage, or 2 more color fixing turns or whatever. Yeah,
the fact that it gives energy but doesn't use it is pretty nice, in that you can just kind of do whatever you want with the energy. Sometimes it goes to waste in decks that I played it in, but sometimes it's just kind of nice to have around.
But they don't know that, right? Like, you could just have Harness Lightning in some of those decks.
But
right,
the
exactly.
rate isn't bad, right? Like, even without the energy, it would probably be fringe playable. So I
forget that this card even gives energy sometimes.
But it's nice that if you happen to be playing any kind of other energy, I mean, this is not like primarily an energy generating card, but if you tack that onto any card, it definitely makes it a lot better in limited. And it just gives you, like, you only need 1 Aether Hub or 1 Harness Lightning for that to be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I give this card a 2.5. I think it'll go in a few different decks if it's good, and so far it's been pretty good for me.
Yeah, I would agree. It's basically divination, maybe a little bit better on average. So it's probably in the 3 range to me.
All right, next up we have Revolutionary Rebuff.
Revolutionary Rebuff is an instant for 1 in a blue. It says counter target non-artifact spell unless its controller pays 2.
So obviously people compare this to Miscalculation, which is probably a miscalculation.
Well, Miscalculation is a modal spell, and this is not.
Right.
Isn't Rune Snag literally just this card without the non-artifact clause?
Yeah, and like when you draw the second and third ones, it's better or whatever, but...
oh, sure. Does it have the Kindle effect? Or whatever it's called?
Yeah, but this card is okay. It's a card I'm not like necessarily psyched about playing, but that doesn't really mean that it's bad as much as...
Really? You wouldn't be psyched about playing like a Mana Leak?
Well, it's not quite Mana Leak, and every once in a while I've had it really come back to bite me that it doesn't counter... Like, you just want to counter artifact. You're like, well, not today, for some reason.
Yeah, there's a lot of artifacts in this set, like a lot. And if that does shape standard, this card gets a lot worse. I have played it some. I think it's good in your tempo decks, but I think that it's 2 mana is not enough to make it good in control decks as far as slowing them down, and the fact that it doesn't hit artifacts is pretty awkward at times.
Yeah, I think that the card it reminds me of like... It's likely if they gave us something this powerful and put like a clause on it, it's because they expect it to be Doomblade. Like, all right, guys, here's Doomblade. You guys asked for it. Oh, thanks, Wizards. Thanks for giving us a spell that kills nothing in this standard format.
Yeah, it's like there's no pleasing you people. Yeah, I agree. I think that they wouldn't print this card if it were going to be
Mana Leak.
Yeah. Because they would never... I think they learned their lesson the last time they printed Mana Leak. And that card will never be in Standard again.
Yeah, which is sad. I mean...
I love Mana Leak.
I love Mana Leak, too. I love Mana Leak formats, even.
But I think this card, like, all that being said, is still okay.
I think it's okay. Yeah, obviously we're dogging on it because it's not Mana Leak. But at the same time, it's still good.
Yeah, well, it depends on your other options, right? I mean, other than this, you basically, there aren't really any... counters that hit everything at 2 mana, and although non-artifact is something, it's probably like not as problematic as say like you can't really play like a bunch of main deck negates, so it kind of is what it is, right? Like,
yeah, I think this card is probably better than Essence Scatter, like on average, even though that card hasn't been in Standard in a while. I think that it's pretty good.
It's playable, right? I mean, it's not like some card you're super thrilled you get to jam in your deck, but like if this is the card you need, it's the card you need, and it's not bad.
Right. I mean, there was a Standard format where Gainsay was the most commonly played counterspell. So like counterspells are very, very situational. It just depends on what the metagame looks like.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be like Cryptic Command to be good in your deck. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the card does not have to be like powerful in a vacuum.
Yeah, I actually would give this card a 3. I think that it will be in multiple decks and like be a player in Standard. Obviously, there will be days and weeks where like the card's not great because of the way that Standard is shaped, but overall, I think the card will see play.
Yeah, I could even see this as being like a format-defining card.
Yeah.
If the metagame shakes out that way. There's just a lot of ifs surrounding this card that would prevent me from saying it's like going to be an all-star like I would if it were Mana League.
Like that 4 rating.
Yeah, but I think it's the high end of 3, maybe 3.5 even.
It's just not really like an all-star type card, right? It's like the kind of thing where your opponent gets...
Well, it is if there's no artifacts.
Well, right, but I mean, because there are your opponent... Like, there are ways you can build your deck to make this card much less effective.
Yeah, but like, what if the format shakes out where like... I think what Casey's saying is, if in a format where like people start playing main deck shatters and like stopping you from playing artifacts, this card gains equity there.
Right, or if the best decks just aren't playing that many, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
A deck has to be playing a pretty big number of artifacts before I would like be siding this out. Like 2 or 3 is not enough for me to be just like completely off this card.
Exactly, because it's gonna get something.
Yeah, it's just slightly awkward if your opponent like is on mono Gear Hulks or whatever.
Yeah, no, like it can definitely go badly for you, but I think generally you're going to be able to find something. And with these kind of soft counter spells, it always ends up sort of being counter what you can.
Right. And at 2 mana, it's not even bad against control decks. If you can counter a Hellion with this, like your life's going pretty well.
All right, next up we have the Fastlands. So yeah, we got our enemy Fastlands. They are better than people think they are, and including myself, I keep not putting them in deck lists and then being like, I don't know why it's not in here. Like, control decks played them historically. I don't know why I don't think it's going to go in this control deck. I just keep forgetting.
Yeah, I've basically played as many Fastlands as I can in every deck that I've played, and I think they're great.
Yeah, I think they're great too. I don't know why even myself gets caught in the trap of like just not having these included in deck lists. Yeah. They're good, and like they're good a lot.
I would say in most decks, like just having untapped mana early is more important. So in like everything that's not trying to cast Emrakul, having untapped mana early is a lot better than having untapped mana late.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's even true of control decks, right? Like if you need untapped mana early for your counter spells, like you have double blue or double red,
I completely agree with you there.
Yeah, like getting your Void Shatters and your Harness Lightnings or whatever online is way more important than getting your noxious Gear Hulk 5 turns later.
100%. Like, just being able to actually play spells in the early game. The way you typically lose games of Magic when you have a bunch of tap lands is it's not playing tap lands on turn 11 that hurts you, right? It's playing tap lands on turn 2.
Exactly. I would give these cards a 5 too. I think that they're going to see modern play as well.
Oh, yeah, the old ones did. These ones are, I think somehow even better. Because like the colors are a little bit better for Fastlands. So
not even just did. I mean, they continue to, right? I mean, like Blackleaf Cliffs is still
it's still 4 of them
just still playing.
Yeah. Like, sorry, and like the green white one has seen play in every like Malera pod or whatever version of that deck is the flavor of the month. And yeah, I think that these cards are great.
They're just nicely balanced, right? Like it's like there's a drawback, but it's not a crazy drawback and not one you necessarily feel bad about.
Exactly.
Yep. Coming up next, we have Scrap Heap Scourger. This card is 2 mana for a 3/2 artifact creature. It has an activated ability. Oh, it can't block, and it has an activated ability of 1 and a black to exile a creature card from your graveyard and return Scrap Heap Scourger to the battlefield.
So yeah, this card is really good. I think that in decks that I've heard of some people talking about playing it in decks that don't play black mana, and I don't think it's that good. Like Watchwolf, slightly worse Watchwolf is not quite good enough. But if you're having any kind of recursion with this in your aggro deck, this card is bonkers.
It could even just be like, I could imagine playing this in like red-white with some Aether Hubs and Harnessed Lightnings or something if that was something you were really in the market for. Like,
sure, you decided I want some way to be able to activate it.
But you don't need a lot. Like, when I've been playing this card is quite good, and like, it's not that the like recursion ability is really usually that good, but it's quite good against sweepers. It's good if you have a vehicle or whatever, and like you can sort of do the whole like, okay, you kill a bunch of my creatures, and if turn I get 1 back, crew my vehicle, that kind of stuff. It's just as long as your deck isn't really in the market for blocking, that's probably the bigger
Yeah, I found this card to be quite good, specifically with vehicles. Like even on multiple levels, right? Like your smuggler's copter can both discard this profitably and just it can come back to jump in your copter. I don't know. I think the card is great. So I actually would give this card a 4. I think it will actually be a defining card of Standard.
Yeah, I think that it's going to see play in a lot of different types of decks too, not just the ones that are intuitive.
It doesn't feel like a card that, would you guys agree that you probably don't want 4 of these most of the time?
I think that some of the decks do.
Maybe the most aggressive ones, but it feels like there's sort of, especially on the second part, there's pretty big diminishing returns.
Yeah, I mean, you run out of creatures in your graveyard, for sure.
Depending on the deck, the second one has diminishing. I would agree with that, but the cards, like the best Mardu... What is that card called? The warrior getting back guy? The 2/1?
I don't know. Let's assume it's Mardu Warrior
champion?
getting back guy.
Yeah, this is the best Blood Soak champion I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, if you compare this to like Despoiler of Souls, which was a card in Origins that I thought looked marginally interesting, this card is just like actually better on every single axis. So,
yeah, it has 1 more toughness, much less strict casting cost, and less strict activation cost.
Yeah, I think that Despoiler was like exile 2 creatures from your graveyard. It was black, and it was a 3/1.
And I think it was black to activate too.
Sure, but that was still a card that I thought like looked kind of interesting at times. So,
next up we have Filigree Familiar. This is Obi, as I like to call it. It's 3 mana for a 2/2 artifact creature, Fox. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life, and when it dies, you draw a card. This card has been way, way better in testing than it looks like on paper. Like, it does Solemn Simulacrum impressions.
Yeah, I would disagree with that, if only for the fact that I think this card looks really good on paper. I think it looks exactly as good as it is. I think this card is really good.
I see. So I disagree with everything you said, except for the fact that I think it is good on paper. Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah, other than the fact that I think it does pass the eyeball test. But yeah, this card's great.
Yeah, I think this card is... I think this is literally a format-defining card. It's like a really good artifact creature. And it doesn't get punished by if your opponent was suddenly like, I'm going to hate artifacts, this card certainly doesn't care.
Right, yeah. If your opponent's showing up with shatters, kind of so what about that? You gain 2 life and 2 for 1 to your opponent.
If your opponent is shattering your 2/2 Fox, it sounds
things are working out.
I don't know. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah, this card is... It does. Kitchen Fink's impressive. The card is really good. Michael?
It's just solid. I mean, it's pretty easy to see. If you have, I mean, obviously, if you're playing against an aggressive deck, the card is just great. And if you're playing a deck with a bunch of stuff you're trying to emerge, it's different than Pilgrim's Eye and Primal Druid, but it might be nice to have some variety in what kind of effect you're getting out of these cards.
Yeah, I agree. Up next, we have Unlicensed Disintegration. This card is a black, a red, and 1. For instant, destroy target creature. If you control an artifact, deal 3 damage to that creature's controller. This card does better. Better is sometimes a better to the slaughter. From my playing with it.
Why do you compare it to the slaughter?
Because you can get a creature and a planeswalker at once for 3 mana.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think that card reminds me more of Searing Blaze than Murder, which is actually, it reads like Murder, but it plays like Searing Blaze, which is pretty good. But Searing Blaze is a very good card, and Murder's a fine card. So if it's a combination of both of those, yeah, it's something.
Yeah, it's just, this is just a good card. If you don't have an artifact, but you just have to kill something, 1 black-red for an instant removal spell is fine.
It's a murder that's easier to cast in 2-color decks.
Yeah, it's kinder on your mana, right?
Yeah, but if you just have to play with an artifact, right? I mean, you're not it's not great, but it's still a card you're happy to cast. No, it's not the worst card in your deck or anything. And if you do have an artifact, it can be pretty great. A removal spell that is reaching and, depending on the other stuff you're playing in your deck, those points of damage add up a lot. And like Spencer said, it's great for killing planeswalkers and all that kind of stuff.
And also you might think, if their planeswalker has to be pretty low, it's to be like 3 low. No, you just get rid of the thing in its way and then attack it. Like, get rid of the thing in its way, deal it 3 damage, and like also can kill it in combat after that. So it's killed a lot of planeswalkers for me.
It also allows you, like, if you have a bunch of smaller creatures, it allows you to use the 3 damage from it efficiently, even if you want to kill a planeswalker. Like, if you had some more expensive spell that like dealt 6, planeswalker might be on 4, but this like will let you split your attackers in a way that some combination of the 3. There's a very high chance you're going to be able to kill the planeswalker exactly, and deal the rest to the. So like it just powerful. Yep. And if it doesn't have the extra ability, it's still fine.
Yeah. Up next we have is it Verdius?
Verdurous? I'd never seen or heard this word before in my life. I'm not entirely sure what it means, but I'm sure it has something to do with trees.
Yeah, I mean, look at the art. There's a tree growing out of the middle of it. It's great.
Yeah, so go ahead and read that for us, Michael.
Verdurous Gearhulk is a 4/4 trample for 3 and 2 green. It is an artifact creature, and when it enters the battlefield, you distribute 4 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control.
This card is super overhyped.
So I think it's better than it reads. I thought the card looked bad.
Oh, I don't think it looks bad.
I thought it looked bad.
Oh no, I think the card is good.
But after playing against the card, I think it's a little bit better than I thought it was. But it's a card that only is good when you're ahead, I think. Because like an 8/8 for 5 is not that good. It's fine if your opponent has nothing. Obviously, it kills them. But that's not a high impact card.
All of the old school Magic players rolling over in their graves when you said that.
An 8/8 for 5 is fine.
8/8 trample, and that's its basement case. That's like its absolute worst is an 8/8 for 5.
So I had a different reaction. I read this card and I thought like, oh, this card's really good, but like people are saying it's the best Gearhulk, which maybe is true. I don't know.
I think that if I'm not mistaken, Michael put this as the best card in the set.
Yeah, I did.
Oh. Ooh.
I think this card is really, really good.
That does not surprise me, Michael Hinderocker.
It's just, it makes combat go in your favor. Like, if you're both playing creature decks, this card is really bad news for your opponent. If your opponent is trying to kill your stuff with Kozilek's Return, this card is really bad news for your opponent. And what I like about it is that compared to a lot of other cards, I don't think you have to try very hard. Like, I think this card is just, I mean, I don't want to say it's like as good as Gideon, but it's good in the same way that cards like Gideon are, where you don't really you don't have to be a Verdurous Gearhulk deck. It's just a 5-drop that's powerful.
Yeah, that's true. It's like sometimes the best thing is the simplest thing.
Well, just that, like, there isn't a lot that can go wrong with it. That you're not
nothing, right?
Right. You're just playing a creature and you get a pretty good ETB, and like, it doesn't have to be the star of the show. It's just like, it's good at what it does. And if the worst thing it can possibly be is an 8/8 for 5, I can live with that.
I like that I said this is the most overrated card in the set, and I didn't see Michael's list. I think it's good. I just think that like maybe I'm missing something. I've actually played some games with the card, and it's like pretty powerful, but I don't know.
I've won a fair number of games with it, and I've also died to it a lot. I've had a couple of times where like I thought I was stabilized or whatever, and my opponent had some nonsense turn of like, I kill a bunch of their creatures and they're like, Liliana minus, get back Gearhulk, put all my counters on a Grimflayer, attack you for 8, next turn do it again. Where I just like, I felt like I wasn't getting killed by a 12/12 Grimflayer anytime soon, and yet here we are.
Sure. I think that this card is very good when you're ahead. If you're ahead and you play this card, it's usually the end of the game. If you're behind, it doesn't really do much in the way of catch up, unless you're playing like a creature mirror and you've got creatures looking at creatures.
And I think that's important to note is like how much of that is going to go on, because I was just right when you said it, I was like, well, if you're in a creature mirror, like it not only does it like catch you up, it might just swing the entire thing.
So
yeah, if you're at parity or winning, this card is good. If you're behind, I think it's probably usually going to be bad.
I think that even in a creature mirror, when you're behind, this might actually swing it.
So when we're talking about
you're
a card
slightly behind,
though, being good in creature mirrors and also being very good like when you're on the play, it sounds so much like Gideon. Like, Gideon is the kind of card where Gideon is sometimes like really, really mediocre. But I think the fact that this is just so crushing when you're ahead is really powerful. I think having cards that just slam the door shut when you've sort of jumped out to a little bit of a lead is like a really powerful thing, because otherwise these games go really long. And
I would give this card like a 3 or a 3.5.
Yeah, I would say it's probably a 3. I think this card will see plenty of play in like basically every mid-range deck.
Yeah, I don't see any way that this card isn't really seeing a pretty good amount of play, just because it's just solid. It's just like you're gonna play this card.
Let's go to my next fun of Noxious Gearhulk. This card is not 5 mana as much as I thought it was at the beginning. It is black 4 for a 5/4. It has menace. It's an artifact creature construct, and when it enters the battlefield, you may destroy another target creature. It is a May ability, Casey.
It is?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. I thought it was.
It's also not a creature your opponent controls, which means when you get Emrakul with this, it's going to feel real bad.
Yeah, interesting. I read that card at least 10 times and thought it was not a May ability.
No, it doesn't really matter. I'm just giving you black. Obviously, we've played this card in case anyone's wondering. This is what I call anyway, I should finish reading the card. You may destroy another target creature. If the creature is destroyed this way, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness. Yeah, I think this is like one of the sweetest fun ofs ever. The menace ability is like pretty good in this format, probably. Overall, I think this card is good. I think it's a fun of, but I think it's a sweet fun of.
Yeah, I've played more than one, and I've been pretty happy with them, but I think that if it's not a May ability, it's not as good against Emrakul as I thought it was, so the card's a little bit worse than I thought it was. But most of the time, I think it's very good against the Green Gearhulk, for example. So I think that card is still fine, or maybe better than that. It clocks, it gains you life. Like, it does a lot to swing a game.
Yeah, it's like a 2-for-1 on a stick that's like also gains you incidental life, right? Like, it's a good card.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And Menace is better when you're getting to blow up a creature too, right? Like, it kind of... It feels cohesive, and like the pieces are pretty powerful. But this isn't a card you probably want to play a ton of. I think you're basically right. Like, you're probably playing 1 or 2. Or
I would give this card like a 3 also. I would give it a similar rating. And here's the reason. So you're like, Spencer, you just gave us other card that's probably going to be like a 3 or 4 of like the same rating as this card. And I think that they're in like the impact in their decks is going to be different. Like, you really want a one of this card in like a lot of different decks, right? Like, Noxious Gearhulk is going to fit into Jund, Grixis, Black-White, like a lot of different decks, right? Where Viridius Gearhulk, I think, will fit into more of the same kind of shells, like different green-based creature decks. And it's like even Noxious Gearhulk could fit into Voracious Gearhulk decks, and I don't think that's always true of Voracious Gearhulk. And I think that Noxious Gearhulk will be a pretty important role player. Just like Viridius Gearhulk will be a pretty important role player in Standard.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked for Noxious Gearhulk to not end up seeing that much play, just because 6 mana is
some
expensive.
Yeah.
For like a removal spell, because I think in the decks that are playing it, a 5/4 is, I mean, a 5/4 is something, but it's not exactly like game ending or anything.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, you're definitely getting a big body to go along. I like this card better in mid-rangey decks better than control decks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've liked the card in every deck I've played it in. I think it's very good, and it's something you certainly have to be aware of because it changes like your clock math and things like that quite a bit. So I think it's certainly a card to be aware of out of any black deck, and I think it will see play at least as one of out of every black deck that's not like an aggro deck.
Next up, we have Aetherworks Marvel. That card is...
Aetherworks Marvel is a legendary artifact for 4, and it says, whenever a permanent you control is put into a graveyard, you get an energy. And then it has an ability that says, tap Aetherworks Marvel and pay 6 energy. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast a card from among them without paying its mana cost. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So
this card has a lot of potential. We've seen a lot of different deck lists playing this card from the SEG guys. I think it's pretty hard to evaluate exactly where energy will be in this format. But I think of the energy cards, a lot of people talked about the dealing damage one, whereas I think that this one probably has the most potential to like both be busted and also just be good, like at random.
Yeah, and I think that longtime listeners of the podcast that had heard like our old style of set reviews will be familiar. This is a textbook one, right? Either it is stone cold unplayable, does nothing, or it's a format defining or warping card.
Here's the thing is, after playing with different decks, it could just be okay in some decks. Like just a random Aetherworks Marvel as a one of.
I'm curious. I've like written down some deck lists where I was trying Aetherworks Marvel as like a one or two of, kind of more like an incidental value thing, but I'm not convinced that without playing a bunch of pretty big spells or a lot of energy spells that like you're either going to get to 6 energy consistently, or because if it's not easy for you to get energy, I worry that you need to be casting something like really insanely high payoff for it to be worth it.
Sure.
And if I am playing a bunch of energy spells, I'm sort of nervous that like my deck is just going to be bad.
Sure. I think that this is one that we'll just have to see. Kind of like.
Yeah, right. We'll say it's bad and then proceed to get absolutely mauled by it.
Yeah, either it's insane or I have a hard time thinking that like a deck that plays it just for value is very good, or that it's like the best use of that slot in any case.
Sure.
So I think that if it's good, it's a combo deck and possibly a broken one.
All right, next up we have Ether Hub. I think this is number 3 on multiple lists, which I think might be a good spot for the card. It's a land. It enters the battlefield. You get an energy. You can tap it for a colorless, or you can tap it and pay an energy to get 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Goodbye, Tindo Icebridge in Modern.
Yeah, I mean, that card didn't see a ton of play, obviously, but it was a one-of in what was the best deck for a time. And this card is just strictly better. But in Standard, it's felt a lot like, a land that taps for 5 color of mana for no downside in the decks that want it to be.
Yeah, I mean, this card's been pretty powerful in our playtesting.
Yeah, this card I actually like. It goes pretty well in a deck where you're really trying to generate a lot of energy for whatever reason. Although sometimes you're a little more loath to pay the energy for the mana. But it's also just like great if you're playing. I don't know. You don't need, like just 4 Aether Hubs and 4 Harness Lightnings is enough for me to be excited about this card. Yeah, it just doesn't take that much work to be pretty good.
Yeah, one of the thoughts that I've had playing with the card is like, can I play like a 3-color control deck with 4 of these if like it makes enough energy? And the answer could be yes.
I think the answer is snap yes. I mean, if you're playing more than one other spell that generates energy, I don't think it's even close. And even if you're only playing one, it might be enough.
Yeah, and this card is a good outlet for your energy from Glimmer of Genius, if nothing else.
Yeah, I've been impressed with Ether Hub. I think this card is a format-defining card. I actually think it's a 4.
Yeah, I have it about the same place. It's actually just like one of the better lands that was only a land that they've printed in quite some time.
Yeah. Next up we have Torrential Gearhulk. That card is green, go ahead and read it, Michael.
Torrential Gearhulk is an artifact creature. It's a 5/6 for 4 and 2 blue, and it has flash. When Torrential Gearhulk enters the battlefield, you may cast target instant card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that card will be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead.
Thoughts?
So I think this is the best Gearhulk. I think that it's this is certainly the kind of card that's near and dear to my heart. So I probably overhype it a little, but I think that this could be one of, if not just the literal best card in this set. I think that what it does for control decks is incredibly powerful. Being able to flash back like a counter spell or a removal spell and block a creature, or a draw spell in the matchups where that's more relevant, like just the versatility of the card. It's far more versatile than any of the other Gearhulks and is incredibly powerful in its own right.
So what... My biggest issue with this card is that I'm not entirely... when I looked through just the list of instants available, I was a little bit underwhelmed.
Yeah, there's actually like only 70 instants total in standard.
It just felt like there was a lot of stuff that like just wasn't very good. And I'm a little bit nervous about playing a bunch of cards that I'm not that excited about the front side of in a deck, hoping to get the back side for free.
Here's the thing. I think that if you view this card as a split counterspell / removal spell with the 5/6, it's still pretty exciting.
Yeah, the bigger question is like how many counter spells am I really happy to play in my deck? Like, well, my bigger if this card is bad, I mean obviously it's not bad, like it's very powerful, but if this card ends up not working out as much as it has the potential to, I feel like it'll happen because the spells hold it back. Like your density of cards you don't want to play will get too high with this in your deck.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that you probably need to be in the 15 to 20 instance range with this card, which if you're not playing like a pretty dedicated control deck, you'll have a pretty hard time hitting. This doesn't go in your mid-range blue decks. It's more focused.
No, I agree. I think that it's going to be a 2-of in some deck somewhere. And I think that it's good. Let's move on to the next card that we've actually given a few talking points to. We have Harnessed Lightning. It's not Harnessed Lightning. Oh, it is Harnessed. Oh, I spelled it wrong. Good talk. Thanks, Quentin. Just kidding. Quentin had literal nothing to do with that. It's an inside joke between me and Quentin when I wrote on Quentin's deck list.
So, Harnessed Lightning is an instant for 1 and a red. You choose a target creature. You get 3 energy, then you may pay any amount of energy. Harnessed Lightning deals that much damage to that creature.
This card's really good. Just to be frank, I've literally killed X7s with this card. Like this card is Doomblade, a lot of the time.
Yeah, or at least like a roast at instant speed that can hit flyers. I've gotten 5 a lot more than I've gotten more than that.
Oh. Yeah, but obviously hitting a 7-drop is not atypical, but I have done it.
But I feel like Avacyn is really, like, if I can kill an Avacyn with this, I'm, like, pretty psyched about how that all went down, right? Like, I feel like if I'm getting 4, I don't know, a third of the time or more. Because the thing is, like, a lot of the time you get to cast it for 2, and then it's great. Man, if you have, like, an Aether Hub and you are like, yeah, Harness Lightning, kill an X2, and leave an extra energy so I can make a mana, like, that's great too. So it's sort of, you get it kind of on both ends, right?
Yeah, I agree. This card is versatile, which it does not read.
Yeah, because it has the mode where it's Pyretic Ritual in some decks, and that's weird.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, right, we were trying it in like Aetherworks Marvel decks, right, where sometimes you would like cast it and choose to pay none just to.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like the strange mode.
Yeah, the hidden mode of Harness Lightning.
Yeah, overall, I think this card is really good. I would give this card a 4. I think it will be a format-defining card.
So do you think
maybe a 3.5?
Do you think this works better in like controlling decks than more aggressive decks, or do you think it's just always great?
I certainly don't know how much like. The thing is, if you're going to play this card in an aggressive deck, why aren't you just playing Galvanic Bombardments?
And so I think that's kind of true, but it is interesting that like if you're an aggressive deck that generates really any kind of energy, it is pretty sweet to be able to kill bigger creatures with
that. Could be true. Spell. So like maybe in like the red-green energy deck might want this over something like Galvanic Bombardment. I would believe that.
It just I've had that happen enough times where like it's pretty sweet to pay like 2 mana to kill something like a 4/4 or whatever.
Yeah, I mean I've also like. I think in your most aggressive decks, like if you weren't playing the energy aggressive deck, you would usually play Incendiary Flow over this just because going face is so critical in your aggro decks. But in the green red energy deck, I've also used it as this card is Pyretic Ritual there just to keep my Hellions in play.
Oh, that's kind of sweet too. Yeah, or like ones, you could even almost use it as a combat trick, right? To like trade up in combat.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're attacking a lot. Yeah.
The card is pretty versatile in those decks, and it's not necessarily. I agree with Spencer. It does not read like a modal spell as much as it is.
Yeah, it's surprisingly versatile. because these are things that I wasn't really seeing until we started actually playing games with it, and then you just like realize all this cool stuff you can do. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, actually, just how I felt. They said that we would feel that way about energy, and I did. Like I've learned a lot about energy in the last couple of weeks. So, coming up next, we have Smuggler's Copter. This card is 2 mana for a 3/3 vehicle. When it attacks, you discard. You may draw a card if you do discard a card.
Yeah, and also it triggers on blocking, and also the card has flying.
Yeah, a lot of things.
It's a lot of text for 2 mana.
And it's got crew 1. This card's really good, like really, really good. I think this card is one of the better cards in the set. Like legitimately, I think that it will be important to play instant speed removal spells because of this card.
Yeah, and this card, even I've heard of people talking about playing this card in Affinity and Modern, and I don't think it's crazy. Like, I don't know that it's going to be a staple of the deck, but I think this card has a lot of power. And just the fact that it's so difficult to block, so difficult to kill, and it gives card selection to aggressive decks, which is something that they usually lack sorely.
And not only card selection, I mean, with both Madness and like... There's a bunch of stuff in this format you're sort of interested in, like Scrap Heap Scrounger or whatever, right? I mean, if you discard a Scrap Heap Scrounger, it's like not even really just card selection anymore, right? There's all kinds of stuff you can discard where it's even better than the filtering, and it's certainly not like you're paying a premium cost for the filtering part of it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, attacking with your 3/3 flyer.
Right, I mean, like compare this to Sky Skiff, which, you know, is 2 for a 2/3 vehicle with flying that also crews for 1, and like is probably fine and limited. Right, this card is just like so much better than that. And that's sort of the interesting thing with vehicles in general, right? Like there are some that are clearly more designed for constructed play, and some that are designed to like be sort of limited filler.
Yeah,
and when you see like the ones that are really designed to sort of be pushed and constructed, like Smuggler's Copter is just really. You're getting a lot for what you're paying.
Yeah, it really comes across on this card how much it is tuned for constructed, because this card is good. We've played it in a bunch of different types of decks too.
Yeah, I think this card is just really good. Like, just really good.
I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying, like, you have to... I think the looting effect has to be better than just card selection for the card to be great.
Is that true? Like...
I'm happy. I mean, I'm a lot happier if there's something I'm wanting to discard or a Madness spell or something, but it's probably still okay without that.
People
but
are
I think
talking about like playing a Sky Skiff in Standard, and it's like so if they're talking about that just makes this card like insane, right?
I don't know. I don't think I'm at all interested in playing Sky Skiff.
Neither am I. Like, when Matt Kling said it, I was like, well, that's ridiculous. He would never do that. But at the same time, like, the fact that that's a thought that would cross somebody's mind makes you, like, it should make you appreciate Smuggler's Copter even more.
Yeah, just put them side by side and, you know, cry when your opponent crushes your Sky Skiff with a Smuggler's Copter at the pre-release.
Yeah. And, yeah, I mean, we've kind of said everything there needs to be said about this card, but it's great. If you haven't played with this card yet, definitely play with it because it looks good, and I think it plays better than that.
Yep. All right, up next, we have Fumigate. I cannot believe that they named a Magic card Fumigate.
Yeah, the art is great, too. They're
fumigating?
The gremlins.
Yeah, they're crop dusting them.
So... I've heard this card called Sphinx's Wrath before, and it's kind of what it looks like. Against, like, the most aggressive decks, if you actually survive to play this in your control deck, it's probably going to be the end of the game. If you kill 4 creatures and gain 4 life, that's probably just it against, like, your typical mono-red style deck.
This card is like it's a good 5-mana
Yeah,
wrath.
That's what I said right when it was spelled. It's like, well, this is probably the best... That's not on Hallowed Burial. Like...
it's pretty exciting, like, for one that you're not paying 4 for, right? Like,
right,
if you pay 4, great, but...
On Hallowed Burial is, like, probably the best 5-mana Wrath. Maybe Crux of Fate. Like, they both, like, in their respective formats were pretty great. I think this one's pretty good.
Right, because Crux of Fate was usually fine, sometimes great, sometimes really awkward. Right? If your opponent had both dragons and non-dragons.
Yeah, Crux of Fate could like actually have a downside sometime. I mean, it could be better sometimes, like because like, you could have dragon or whatever, but like this card it's all upside.
Yeah, this card is just great. Like gaining against decks where you want Wrath, life gain is always good. So, like the upside on this card is just tremendous.
Yeah, I think it's like one of the better 5-mana Wraths we've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean, the bigger question is whether, like, fundamentally 5-mana Wrath is what you want to be doing. But that isn't really about the power level of this card. Like, as far as 5-mana Wraths go, I think this is a lot better than Planar Outburst, for example.
I agree.
Like, and Planar Outburst isn't terrible, but this is much, much better.
Yeah, this card is just really, really good. I think that it's a 4.
I would give this card like a 3.5.
So if this card doesn't see play, though, I would say it's not this card's fault, because in a vacuum, this card is very good. If it doesn't see play, it's because
that makes sense.
The
because
format
blue-white
isn't
control
good for it.
or whatever type of control deck that would play this card is not good.
Probably too many Gideons.
Now
right?
we have a card that I think is actually just worse than it. Coming up next, we have Cataclysmic Gearhulk. It's white 3 for a 4/5 vigilance. When it enters the battlefield, each player chooses an artifact, a creature, an enchantment, and a planeswalker from among the non-land permanents that he or she controls, and then sacrifices the rest. So this card is like not what people are saying it is. It's literally at all.
Yeah, this card is pretty good, but people are saying that it's Tragic Arrogance, and it's not that. Tragic Arrogance had a much different effect than this card.
So I like this card out of mid-range decks against aggressive decks, and that is the only place I like it.
Yeah, Michael and I actually had a really long conversation about this card, about what the effects that like having other artifacts do with this card. Like, you if your opponent has an artifact creature, you don't. This card is not good.
So it used to, like, with Tragic Arrogance, sometimes it was a good thing when they had an artifact creature, because, like, you could stick them with just the artifact creature or whatever and, like, get them to sacrifice another artifact, or, like, you could stick them with, like, a Thopter token or whatever, or, like, not let them pop their Hangerback Walker, like, but when they get to choose, it's, like, pretty...
Yeah, it's
sketchy sometimes. So I like it if your opponent has, like, a lot more stuff than you, and you have, like, one big good creature or whatever, and you play this, like, yes, it's obviously good, but... That's this like literally it.
Yeah, this card is just not played out the way people have told me that it would. One of the huge things with this card is I think people are falling into the letting them choose trap again, where like you let them choose and like you think it might be good enough that won't matter, but
it never is. No, I don't think this card is quite a Punisher card, but it's close to that space for sure.
Like, I had this in my pre-release deck last night, and it was okay. It was like, every time I cast it, it was basically like I Faith Unbrokened my worst creature and chose their worst creature.
Okay.
So, like, it was fine, but not, like, great.
Yeah, it's like, I think that if you curve, like, Gideon into this, or... You're like,
yeah, that's the only time that's been really good for me.
I mean, if you curve Gideon into anything, your opponent is probably in trouble.
Yeah, but I think if you curve Gideon into this, it's probably the end of the game.
Is that not just true of, like, all of the
5 drops? Yeah. Maybe. I don't know.
That's been my experience with Gideon is, like, it's such a good aggressive, like, such a good attacking card that if you play Gideon, if you're on the play and you play, like, anything into Gideon into anything, your opponent is like, yep, I can't possibly ever beat that. Great.
Obviously... It sounds like we're like really down on this card, but it's okay. It is just not Tragic Arrogance.
I see this more as a board card than a card I want in the main. Like, I can think of matchups where I'd be excited about this card, but I don't.
I would actually not be surprised if this card never saw play after the Pro Tour.
That's possible.
Like, I think that a lot of people are going to build decks around it. I'm not saying that it won't see play after the Pro. I said I'm just saying I wouldn't be surprised if it didn't.
Yeah, I would kind of agree with that. The card reads as really powerful, so people are very high on it. But I think that once you get some reps with the card, you realize that it's not...
Even some of your first reps are still pretty good.
Yeah, the card, like, and by all means, the card is fine. It's not, like, I'm going to give it like a 3 or a 3.5, right? Like, it's pretty good. But it's not this back-breaking, game-ending card that it's kind of advertised to be.
Yeah, I am pretty low on my Cataclysmic Eldrazi Displacer decks.
If your opponent has an artifact, it's bad. If your opponent doesn't have an artifact, it's quite
pretty
good.
Yes, because that's the difference.
Yeah, basically, if they get to keep an artifact and a creature, like, it starts feeling pretty bad. But if you're keeping 2 things and they're keeping 1, the game is probably over.
Yeah, exactly. You have to have another creature. Like, this doesn't go in a control deck. It goes in mid-range decks.
Right. So I still, even with that being said, I still kind of like it. I like it as in like a mid-range deck coming out of the board against aggressive decks, because like hopefully my 2 best creatures can block their 2 creatures.
Yeah.
But outside of that scenario,
and it's really
I'm not.
good with Planeswalker in play, right? Because then like you play it, you then can activate the Planeswalker after this comes in.
Right.
Play.
Like it would be sweet with an Omnixilus in play. It would be sweet with a Gideon in play. It would be sweet with. I mean, yeah. It's like it's not a bad card. It just asks a lot of you, and it's like oddly conditional.
Yep. Next up, we have Nissa Vital Force. If I said this was the most underrated card in the set, what would you say, Casey? It's literally number 2 on our list, and I still think it might be the most underrated card, even though it probably, like, putting in, like, there was no way it was going to get number 1, but I like, maybe it's not underrated, just nobody's talking about it, but it's been, like, one of the best cards in playtesting.
Yeah, I would agree this card is very good. I think the reason that it's a little bit underhyped is the deck that you want it in isn't immediately obvious, like what kind of deck you're building around this card.
Yeah.
Where, like, Chandra, the answer is any deck.
I think this card is pretty good in most decks, too. Like, making
that's how it's felt. It's been like, oh, maybe I just do want this in this green deck.
Making the haste 5/5, like, picking up a permanent, embleming, like, it feels like its abilities are pretty divergent, but sometimes, so that can be a good thing or a bad thing in a Planeswalker, right? But when you can get to the ultimate that quickly, it really has 3 abilities, not 2. And I think, like,
that's how I feel about the card. That it's really a 3 ability Planeswalker with no ultimate.
Right. So having those 3 things, like, they're all different enough and good enough in different matches that I could see this card just ending up being like, I don't think there's a card you want like a ton of in most decks. But the first one is very powerful.
I would agree. Like, it's card advantage. It's a clock. It's everything you really need it to be.
And it's different, right? Like, it's not every Nissa. You could play a Nissa that's basically, Lava Axe, but you could also play Nissa that's like a ramp spell, kind of like could like return something to ramp, then make an extra mana the next turn. You could play a Nissa that's pretty close to like a tireless tracker. It just like
the card's just good.
It just does a lot of different things.
I think this card will see a ton of standard play. I would give it a 4.5.
Yeah, I would give it a 4, maybe just because I haven't really played with the card too much yet. I've played against it more than I played with it, but I think the card is good. It's just a matter of what does it compete with, what decks does it go in.
Let's go to number 1 on the list. Chandra, Torch of Defiance. Surprise!
Yeah, this card has got modes on modes.
Yeah. Go ahead, Michael.
Well, Chandra, Torch of Defiance.
Hold on. Should you take a breath first? It might take a minute.
This might take a while. So if this podcast, drags out over another hour, you know what happened. Chandra comes in on 4. She has 2+1s. One says add red to your mana pool. The other one says exile the top card of your library. You may cast it, and if you choose not to cast it, Chandra deals 2 damage to each opponent. She also has a -3, which says Chandra deals 4 damage to target creature, and a -7, which says you get an emblem that says whenever you cast a spell, this emblem deals 5 damage to target creature or player.
Yeah. Sorry, the print's so small, Michael couldn't read it.
That they had to make it smaller with all that, like 400 words.
Her +1 abilities have been like. At first, I thought that they were worse than I thought they would be, but then after playing more games with the card, I was like. So at first, I actually was down on the card. I was like, "Oh, this card's not as good as I thought it was." But here's the thing: is I think this card is a very interesting Planeswalker. The worst thing about this card is its name.
Yeah, because it competes with the 6-mana Chandra, which in your bigger red decks you wanted.
Exactly.
The ramp thing would have been really sweet.
Yeah, that would have been crazy, right? If like this card was named Koth Torch of Defiance, like standard would might actually just be a different format.
Yeah, probably. And I think that they do a pretty good job of balancing that.
Yeah. Here's the thing. This card is a 2 of, a 3 of, and a 4 of in lots of different decks.
Yeah, I played this deck in aggro decks, control decks, mid-range decks, combo decks.
I've played this card in literally everything, and it's been good a large percentage of the time.
The 2 spells I've cast with this the most so far are World Breaker and Reckless Bushwhacker.
Yeah, and you can also add...
That says a lot about this card, right?
Yeah, and you can add Prophetic Prism to my list of...
Oddly pretty good in both of those scenarios. Right?
Yeah.
The
card is... Here's the thing, is it's not Jace the Mind Sculptor, which is obviously what it's being advertised as, but it's really good. It could... I already did a video that I kind of talked about this card, so if you can go to the YouTube channel and check out my spoiler talk video. But this card, its only other downside is that it's protecting itself with a -3, so you have to have another creature in play a lot of the time because of the way the Wizard has made Magic recently for that to be great. But this card goes in so many decks. And it is possible that it sees Modern play, and I think it's possible that it sees Legacy play. If you can find the right shell that wants, if you have a red deck that wants all of these modes.
Yeah, I mean, the Pyromaster saw play, and I think this card's kind of just better than it in every deck that was ever a 1 of in.
Yeah, I mean, Pyromaster was Pyromaster Jund in Modern was a thing for a long time. Now, not being able to hit land drops might make this worse in those kind of decks. I'm not sure. But this card's been great. Really, legitimately great. So, keep an eye out on this one. The $60 price tag, people are saying that's too high, and it might just not be. That just might be what this card is worth for the entire time it's in Standard.
I don't think a set with... promotional products can support a $60 Mythic, but we'll see.
Okay.
I legitimately think that I would not pay $60 for any card in this set that's not one of the...
It's not
a
Soul Ring or
whatever,
okay.
because those will eat some of the value in the set. It's just the way it works.
All right. So that's the set, guys. That's the set review for our... Oh, by the way, yeah. What do you guys give this card? Is it a 5 or is it a 4.5? What do you give it?
A 5, maybe a 5.1. This card's really good. It's one of the better Planeswalkers in quite some time.
Yeah, it's just there are all these ways you can try to decide what the most efficient way to use it or whatever is, but it's just powerful.
So before we get to, before the rabbit hole is gone and I can't jump down it. Has anyone else noticed a certain thing in this set about cards in this set, about a certain art? Because nobody's talked about it, but they have battle droids from Star Wars in this set.
So what you're saying is Magic will soon cease to be a game as Lucasfilm sues them into oblivion?
I'm just saying that there's definitely battle droids.
Sure. The Trade Federation has made it to Kaladesh.
Yeah, I think there's 3 arts with it. We have the unsummon for an attacking creature. Incendiary Sabotage has one on it. Maybe the Trade Federation is what's behind the problems in Kaladesh. I'm not sure. The machines are going to take over. I don't know, but very interesting. Anyway, what do you guys think of the set overall? This is pretty refreshing coming from Shadows and Eldritch Moon, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, I had to cut cards from my list, where in most of the times we've done these, I've had to kind of scrounge towards the bottom of the list.
You had to cut your Thriving Turtles?
Yeah, I mean, there's a real chance that there's at least 10 cards that we didn't talk about today that I would consider playing at the Pro Tour.
And the one you're definitely leaning... Well, the one I'm definitely leaning towards is Thriving Rhino. Card is just great.
I mean, plus, don't you want to play a Thriving theme deck?
God, you could play all 5 of them and Aether Hubs to fuel them.
Thriving Turtle, go.
Aether Hub, cast my Thriving, whatever the red one is. I know the red one is bad. That's all I know.
That's like a 2/1 for 2.
Yeah, there are a lot of X or 2 X's in this set. The 2/1 that pumps itself +1 is not good.
Anyway, overall, I thought the set was super powerful. I think I'm really excited for a new standard. Like, really, really excited.
I like the art. I like
it's just
so
fun to have,
refreshing
and fun and colorful
set after kind of a bunch of darker, because Battle for Zendikar is kind of earthy. Like, there are a lot of like brown tones and like
we've had Eldrazi for the whole year, which means like so much gray and brown.
Yeah, and I mean Eldritch Moon and Shadows are just like actually literally dark.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, it's just always nighttime.
There's a lot of blue in this.
It just looks
blues, reds.
It's just like a prettier world.
Yeah. Thank goodness. But I'm pretty excited. Any final thoughts before we wrap it up? No?
No.
Not especially. I'm excited to play with more of these.
Awesome. Well, don't forget to check out the YouTube channel at youtube.com/c/ccmtg. Don't forget to check out our sponsors at 5 Color Combo and Oasis Games. You can be a Patreon of the show by going to a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/ccmtg. Shout out to all of the listeners and the patrons who make the show possible. We really appreciate you guys, and we look forward to coming at you guys next week after the first week of Standard. So thanks, guys.
See ya.
Magic, 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 magic.